Wisconsin kids are counting on a budget that's going to help us close the gaps, that helps resolve some of the disparities that we see in fundings, resources, and opportunities that currently create inequities in and across our districts and schools. And we've seen so many countless examples of what that means, what it looks like in classrooms, and what kids really need. And instead, we're facing down a budget that's actually going to make our gaps wider. And people are just asking why, at a time when we have so much money. I mean, billions of dollars more than we even expected. Why would we not use this moment to undo some of the damage that we've done in past budgets? Why would we not use this moment to fund special education at a rate that takes the billion-dollar burden off of school district and frees up that money to go to program services and staff? Why wouldn't we raise revenue limits so that money that the state actually provides to schools can be spent instead of just passing it off as a tax cut? No one asked for a tax cut for schools. As one of our speakers said today, every time we poll people on this question, they say, I'd rather my money go to my tax dollars go to fund public education than to just come back to me. It doesn't make any sense. And so I guess the question that people are asking right now is why do we have to beg for this when all of the resources are right there on the table? Wisconsin Public Education Network is a coalition for people like me. I'm a public school parent who had been actively engaged and frustrated seeing all of the politicking that's going into school policy and seeing how it's having impact in my kids' classrooms, in my district, and on teacher morale, and then wondering what I'm supposed to do about it. We try to create a space where we can all come together and take collective action, even in the cracks of all the other stuff we have going on, to make that work a little bit easier and less burdensome, but also to maximize the impact of our collective voice, because one mad mom is never enough, right? It takes all of us together sharing our concerns and our frustrations and our vision for what we know kids need in order to make a difference. And so I invite anyone who shares concerns that our schools aren't currently doing enough to meet the needs of all kids to really get involved. Find a local team, find a local group, connect with our network, and get the support and resources that you need to make a difference for local students. Yes. She asked if more districts will have to go to referenda if this budget is passed. And the answer is yes. We will have to, as we have for the past several decades, continue to vote to raise taxes on ourselves because our state thinks all we want is tax cuts and not actual support for kids in schools. It's an unsustainable system, and that's what's causing so many of the funding disparities that we see across the state. Federal aid that's already earmarked for COVID-related funds is not a substitute for meeting the regular obligation that we have to our children to pay our regular bills. Just because we got a stimulus check doesn't mean we stopped paying our mortgage. It makes no sense. Thank you, Carol, and thank you to all of our speakers for sharing your stories today and for sharing yet again what we all know, what we have heard so many times for so many years in so many stages like this across the state. I forgot to introduce myself when I came up the first time. My name is Heather DuBois Bourenane. I'm Executive Director of Wisconsin Public Education Network. We're a statewide coalition of people who care about kids, who have been forced into advocacy by a state that continues to abandon them cycle after cycle after cycle for reasons that make no sense to any of us, especially at a time when we are on a historic cusp of tragedy and have a historic surplus, the likes of which we have never seen in this state. There's $550 million currently in the budget, totally unallocated, and we're talking about we can't fund special education. What is wrong with us? Budgets are moral choices, and the state of Wisconsin has spoken so clearly. We went to every single one of the state budget hearings. Public education, pre-K through higher ed, was the number one topic of conversation at every single one of them. And no one came before the state legislature at those events and said, we'd like to see you play some last minute games, pretend to give money to schools, but actually it's just a tax cut. 0 people asked for that. They asked for special ed funding to be at least 60%. They asked for revenue limits to be increased so that any aid we did get could actually get to kids and not just come as property tax relief. They asked for English language learner aids that have been frozen for over a decade. They asked for dramatic increases to funding student mental health because the needs are great and rising. And they asked for supports that would help rural students, students in poverty, students with disabilities. The 3 categories of concern that the state has been called out on by the Supreme Court for over a decade and done absolutely nothing to resolve, but everything to make worse. Enough. Today is a day of action, and I thank the people here today who are standing up to take it, and I invite all of you to take action yourself. If you are here physically, get in there and talk to your lawmaker. Don't assume that because of the letter behind that person's name that they're going to agree with you or vote the way you want or don't want. Get in there and talk to them and tell them what local kids need so that they know and you know you've done your due diligence. Visit wisconsonnetwork.org, or if you're here, use your phone to scan these QR codes and send a letter to your lawmaker today, letting them know what those priority needs are. We've made it as easy for you as we could to customize this message or just use our template, but whatever you do, speak up now. Wisconsin, we've got 1 week to do right by our kids, and if we don't, we're due for 2 more years of a status quo that makes sure that they're not going to thrive. That is not okay. It is not okay, and I don't want to come back here in 2 years to say the same thing again. Our collective message is simple. Stop playing politics with our children. Put on the gloves, hold your nose, and pull the budget out of the garbage what got thrown 2 weeks ago and put it back on the table. Our kids are counting on you. Thank you for your time. Again, thank you to everyone who's coming. I do think that our speakers are prepared to answer any questions that you may have for them.